Marcus Chen stood frozen behind his kitchen window, coffee mug suspended halfway to his lips, watching 60 strangers in white robes arrange themselves around his empty swimming pool. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked concrete basin that had been dry for 3 years, since Emma died, since Sarah left, since everything that mattered dissolved like chlorine in abandoned water. "What the hell?" he breathed, recognizing the woman at the front of the group. Sarah's dark hair was shorter now, streaked with premature silver that made her look older than 34. She wore the same white robe as the others, but she held a conductor's baton like a sword. Marcus set down his mug with trembling hands and walked to the back door, his bare feet cold against the tile. The sliding glass door stuck. It always did since he'd stopped maintaining anything, but he forced it open and stepped onto the patio. "Sarah." His voice cracked her name like a whip across the morning air. She turned, and for a moment, the 3 years collapsed between them. Same brown eyes that had looked at him with love, then rage, then nothing at all during the divorce proceedings. Same mouth that had whispered, "I can't do this anymore," the night she packed her bags. "Hello, Marcus." Her voice was steady, professional, the voice of a stranger. "What is this? What are you doing here?" The choir members, men and women of all ages, some he recognized from the community center where Sarah used to volunteer, stood, silent, waiting. A few glanced between him and Sarah with barely concealed curiosity. "Today is the anniversary," Sarah said simply. Marcus's chest tightened. "I know what day it is." "Do you?" She stepped closer to the pool's edge, her white robe rippling in the desert breeze. "Because I wasn't sure. You didn't come to the cemetery. You haven't come any year. Don't." The word came out harsher than he intended. "Don't do this here. Not with." He gestured at the choir, feeling exposed, vulnerable. "Why did you bring them?" Sarah raised the baton, and something shifted in her expression. Pain, yes, but something else. Something that looked like resolution. "Because Emma loved music," she said. "And because someone should sing for her where she died." The words hit him like a physical blow. He stepped backward, nearly stumbling over the patio chair he'd been meaning to fix for months. "Sarah, please. Just go. Take them and go." "No." She turned to face the choir, raised both arms. "We are going to sing." "You can't. This is my property. I can call the police." Sarah's smile was bitter. "Go ahead. Call them. I'm sure they'd love to hear all about what really happened that day." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Around the pool, the choir members shifted slightly, sensing the tension but not understanding it. An elderly black woman in the front row, Mrs. Johnson from the grocery store, looked at him with something that might have been pity. "Sarah." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Don't." She ignored him, brought the baton down, and 60 voices rose in perfect harmony. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. The melody washed over the empty pool like water, filling the concrete basin with something Marcus hadn't heard in 3 years, beauty. The sound was overwhelming, transformative, turning his backyard into a cathedral, and it was destroying him. He pressed his palms against his ears, but the music seemed to seep through his bones. He could see Emma again, 7 years old, dark, pigtails flying as she ran around the pool's edge despite his constant warnings to walk. Could hear her laughter mixing with the splash of water, the squeak of pool toys, the ordinary sounds of a family that had existed here once. "That saved a wretch like me." "Stop," he whispered, but the choir sang louder. Mrs. Patterson from down the street had joined the group, he realized. So had Tom Rodriguez from the hardware store. People he saw every week, people who smiled and made small talk and had no idea what he'd done. What he'd failed to do. The singing swelled, and Marcus saw movement at the edges of his vision. More neighbors emerging from their houses, drawn by the music. Mrs. Kim from next door stood on her porch with her arms crossed. The college kids who rented the place across the street had come out to watch. Even old Mr. Brennan had wheeled his chair onto his front lawn. They were all looking at him, all waiting. "I once was lost, but now I'm found." Sarah's voice rose above the others, clear and strong and broken. Tears streamed down her face, but she never wavered, never let the baton fall. She was magnificent and terrible, like a revenging angel wrapped in white cotton. "Please," Marcus said again, but she was lost in the music now, lost in whatever plan had brought her here with 60 witnesses. The song reached its crescendo, voices lifting toward the cloudless sky, and Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. The same feeling he'd had that day 3 years ago when he'd found Emma at the bottom of the pool, when he'd pulled her small body from the water and pressed his mouth to hers and breathed life that wouldn't take, when he'd sat in the hospital waiting room and lied to the police, when he'd watched Sarah's face crumble as the doctors explained that drowning was quick, usually, but not always. That Emma might have been saved if someone had found her sooner, someone who hadn't been passed out drunk on the living room couch at 2 in the afternoon. The hymn ended, and the silence that followed was deafening. 60 people stood around his empty pool, and Marcus realized they weren't just here to sing. They were here to witness something. Sarah lowered her baton and looked directly at him. 3 years ago today, our daughter drowned in this pool, she said, her voice carrying clearly. In the desert air. She was 7 years old. She loved butterflies and chocolate ice cream and swimming lessons. The neighbors were listening now, really listening. Marcus saw Mrs. Kim pull out her phone. She died, Sarah continued, because the person who was supposed to be watching her was drunk, because the person who promised to keep her safe chose a bottle over his daughter's life. Sarah, stop, because my husband lied to the police and said he was in the bathroom when it happened. Said he heard a splash and came running. Said it was just a terrible accident. Marcus felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. The faces around the pool had changed, neighbor-like curiosity replaced by something colder. You're lying, he said. But his voice came out weak, desperate. Sarah reached into her robe and pulled out a small recording device. Modern, digital, the kind lawyers used. Am I? She held it up so everyone could see. Because I have something I think everyone should hear. Something you said to me the night before I left. When you were drunk again, and guilty, and thought confession might make it hurt less. Marcus's knees went weak. He remembered that night, remembered Sarah packing Emma's clothes while he sat on the bed, whiskey brave and stupid, trying to explain himself, trying to make her understand that he never meant for it to happen. That he'd only closed his eyes for a minute. He'd forgotten about Sarah's habit of recording their fights. Evidence for the divorce, she'd said. Documentation of his drinking. He'd never imagined she'd use it like this. You can't, he whispered. The statute of limitations expired for criminal charges, Sarah agreed. But not for the truth. Not for letting everyone know who Marcus Chen really is. She pressed play. His own voice filled the air, slurred and broken. I was so drunk, Sarah. So goddamn drunk I didn't even hear her fall in. Might have been under for 10 minutes before I woke up. Maybe 15. If I'd been sober, if I'd been watching like I promised, she'd still be alive. Our baby would still be alive, and it's my fault, it's all my fault. The recording continued, but Marcus couldn't hear it over the rushing in his ears. He looked around the circle of faces, neighbors, strangers, the checkout girl from the grocery store, and saw his life ending in real time. Mrs. Kim was definitely recording now. So were others. By tonight, the whole town would know. By tomorrow, everyone would know. Sarah clicked off the recording and slipped it back into her robe. That's who you are, Marcus, she said quietly. That's who you've always been. A coward who lets other people pay for his mistakes. The choir began to move, filing out of his yard in orderly rows. Some of them looked at him with disgust. Others, with pity. A few simply looked away. Sarah was the last to leave. She paused at the gate, turned back. I should have done this 3 years ago, she said. But I was too broken to fight. Too destroyed to think about anything but survival. She smiled, and it was terrible. I'm better now. Stronger. And Emma deserves better than a father who killed her through negligence and a mother who stayed silent about it. She walked away, leaving Marcus alone with his empty pool and the echoes of 60 voices singing grace over his daughter's grave. He stood there until the sun climbed high enough to burn his shoulders through his thin t-shirt, until the last neighbor had gone inside, until even the birds seemed to have abandoned his yard. Then he walked back into his house, past the family photos he'd never had the courage to take down, past Emma's bedroom door that he kept closed, past the living room couch where he'd slept through his daughter's death. He picked up his phone and dialed the number he'd memorized but never called. Riverside Cemetery, a woman's voice answered. I need to visit a grave, Marcus said. Emma Chen. She would have been 10 today. There was a pause. The memorial service was this morning, sir, but visiting hours don't end until sunset. Marcus closed his eyes. Of course Sarah had held a service.